I've got one flame to burn, one race that I can say I ran.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I am the host of this show, and I am really glad to have you along listening in today, wherever it is that you're listening, whenever it is that you might be listening in. I am happy to be back with you after a bit of an unexpected hiatus from these podcasts. I spent, a long weekend chasing my buddy Tracy Outlaw around in New York City while he ran the New York City Marathon. Then I came down with a cold and then had a long weekend last weekend with the Richmond Marathon festivities, which are always a great thing here in Richmond. A large group of folks from the Megs Miles family that I talk about frequently on here. They come from all over the country to run that big race, so it's been a bit of a challenge to get this latest podcast out that I've really been wanting to get out and share with you today. So I'm glad to finally sit down and put this all together for this exciting episode. This episode is sponsored by my mom, Marcia Cartwright. She is one of my Patreon sponsors. She sponsors me through that site. If you want to learn more about Patreon, you can go to my website, 21047.com, TWOTIM47.com. Click on the Support Me tab, and then you can read about how you can back me financially through Patreon to try to grow this message, share this message a little further and a little wider, and just do some different things to, as I always say, run to dark with the light that I have found in this running journey and in the stories of a lot of running friends that I have met along the way. Today's episode is just one of those friends I have met along the way. Several weeks ago now, my friend Lachelle Head and I were at the Marine Corps Marathon, and we were at mile 18 waiting for a couple of special friends to come along. And in the process of doing that, I got to meet a man, Chris Koch. He ran by, and I use ran a little differently because Chris Koch was without arms and without legs, and he was on a skateboard as he went by us. And that just had a huge impact on me that I'll share a little bit more about, or you'll pick up on in my discussion with Chris. But I came home and I just had to know his story. The image of him just stuck with me. As so much of this podcast is about fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith, and how all three of those things really work together in life, and all three of them at one time or another, or maybe at the same time, all bring just these incredible challenges. In running, when you find a way to do that, I think it just parallels, it's motivating for folks that are having struggles in life to apply that sort of strength. And watching Chris Koch go by without arms and legs on a skateboard and a marathon at the Marine Corps Marathon, I said, this guy has to have some fight that parallels some of our life journeys, and we would all benefit from hearing it. And so I interviewed Chris. It's been a couple of weeks ago now, but I will tell you, I couldn't have been more right. In fact, I was a lot more right than I could even imagine after talking to him. He's an incredible man. And if you listen to him, you're not going to get this sense that he feels like he's overcoming anything, which is really the most powerful part of his message. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I want to turn this over to my conversation with Chris Koch. I'll be back on the other side of my interview with Chris. Well, I want to welcome Chris Koch to the 21047.com podcast. So welcome, Chris. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
Well, let me start off by telling you just kind of how I became familiar with your story. I was at the Marine Corps Marathon, I guess it was 2 Sundays ago, and I was with a friend, and we were parked at about mile 18. And this friend and I were talking about all the runners coming up at mile 18 and just this look on their face. And we're runners and we've run marathons, so we recognize these folks just hitting this wall where the race was really getting to be a struggle. And so I'm standing there watching these folks. And then all of a sudden, here comes this man
no arms, no legs, on a skateboard, right at my feet, whizzing by, and this guy had this big grin on his face, and this guy was you. And I turned and I looked at my friend, and we were kind of quiet for a moment. Then I think we were just both overwhelmed with, I think, different emotions, really. Mine was just awed by what I had just seen. Here, all these folks were runners. They clearly had all their limbs, had all the ability to be runners, and had nothing but struggle written on their face. And you had nothing but joy in that moment. So I came home and I had to know who you were. I had to look up your story. Thank God for the internet. You can find anybody out there now if you look hard enough. So I found you and your story. And given that, the Marine Corps Marathon, it was in that Marine and military sort of environment, I guess I jumped to the conclusion that you probably were a vet who had suffered some sort of service injury. And that's not that's not the case. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, Chris, and how I had that so wrong?
Well, first of all, I was going to say, when you're talking about seeing me at mile 18 with a big smile on my face, the first 5 miles were very hilly, and so there was a lot of strain on my face in the first 5 miles, and then probably the last 200 or 300 yards was a very fierce uphill to finish the race. So I was just about spent by the end of that one. But no, I guess to give you background on me, I was born missing both arms, both legs. No real known reason as to why. A lot of people will ask me, if my mom took thalidomide, which was before my time. I grew up on a farm, so there was worry that maybe mom was exposed to chemicals on the farm, but they haven't been able to attribute it to any one thing. It's just one of those things that happens. And, it is what it is. And, so, and honestly, it's been an amazing ride. My story is, far from triumph over tragedy. Yeah, there are bad days, but we all have bad days. And honestly, more often than not, the bad days really have nothing to do with the fact that I'm missing arms and legs. But, my grandma, and you had said in one of your emails before that you watched the Oprah clip on me. And, my grandma started off, day one to how the family was going to, approach this whole me being born without arms and legs. And my grandma jokingly said that my dad never finished anything he started.
I laughed.
And, it's perfect. It wasn't, oh my goodness, this is horrible. What a tragedy. What kind of quality of life is he going to have? It was, all right, it is what it is. We can't change it. Everything's going to be fine. We're going to make the most of it. And we're going to have some good laughs along the way. And, kind of keep it in that theme. My brother, jokingly refers to me as his half brother, and tell people that I have a disarming personality, and a lot of cheesy dad jokes. But, it helps keep life light and fun. If you can't laugh at life, what can you laugh at? Kind of, the conclusion I've come to.
And so I read an awful lot about that, and I'm really taken by that piece, just how important, clearly, when you were born, you had no clue really that this was going on. So it was so important, these people around you, how they were shaping you and preparing you for this life without arms and legs, and just how important their attitude was in this. I read somewhere where you said your dad and your mom, they expected you to be just like every other kid. What were some of the things that you did growing up to just make sure? What are some of the things they did to make sure that you just were another kid?
Well, I guess just that. I was just another kid. I wasn't, poor Chris who was born without arms and legs. Although that is who I am, it's pretty obvious, I'm missing arms and legs, but it wasn't what defined me. And, when I was a kid playing street hockey or road hockey with friends, other parents would say to mom and dad, oh, should we get our kids to kind of, take it down a notch so Chris doesn't get hit in the face with a puck or a tennis ball. And Mom and Dad said, no, that's part of being a kid. That's part of, playing as a kid is you fall off the swing set. You get a stick in the mouth, playing street hockey. You fall down from time to time. And, it really doesn't matter if you're raising a child, with arms and legs or without arms and legs. Every kid needs to struggle. Every kid needs to, fall down and know how to pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and get back into the game or get back into the fight or whatever, not the fight, but the life. And we have struggles. Robin Williams said, everyone you meet is fighting a battle that you can't see. We all have our story. We all have our struggles. We all have our obstacles in life that we, have to get over and overcome. And, I guess what Mom and Dad did was they never let the fact that I was missing arms and legs be an excuse. It was kind of, all right, I can't change it. I don't have arms and legs. I'm never going to have arms and legs. So you can make it your excuse and you can lead a miserable life, or you can say, all right, it is what it is. I accept it. I'm going to make the most of life, and I'm going to have as much fun as I possibly can, and I'm going to achieve as much as I possibly can. And one of the really interesting questions I get from time to time, I'm a motivational speaker, and I go into conferences and schools and seminars, and schools are the most fun because they ask the questions that adults want to ask, but have been conditioned not to. But one of the questions I've been asked is, if you had arms and legs, do you think you would be so determined and headstrong to do all the things that you do? And I mean, there's no way that you would know the answer to that question, but I suspect that I might have taken the fact that I had arms and legs for granted and not been so determined to get out there and experience and see as much of life as I am now. And I do it to prove to myself what I'm capable of. I do it to prove to others what I'm capable of. And hopefully in doing things like the Marine Corps Marathon, or when I go surfing or snowboarding or whatever, to encourage people to challenge themselves and push themselves and take themselves out of their comfort zone and remind themselves what they're capable of as individuals.
Yeah, I will tell you that part of the emotion that overwhelmed me in seeing you sort of come out of the blue was just that piece right there, the reality that I think there are times I take running for granted, watching what you were doing, what you were going through to just be out there with everybody else. I think I do. I think other people do too. We kind of take it for granted. So I'm glad young people ask you that question. It's a perfect answer for them to hear. I am curious. I was just sitting here thinking when you were just talking about your mom and your dad and how influential they were in raising you. I grew up in a wonderful, functional, I like to say it in quotation marks, functional home, whatever that looks like, a good middle-class home.
Yeah.
And right out of college, I went to work in a residential treatment center for at-risk kids. And these were some kids who grew up in some real challenging neighborhoods, definitely some real challenging homes, saw a lot of things in their houses that I came to realize I never saw. And there came a moment, I was probably in my early 30s in this job, when it hit me just what an impact my mom and dad had on who I had become. It's easy at that age to think where you are is all about you. I've got myself here. And I know in that moment of realizing that, I sent my mom and a dad a thank you note, and probably sent a lot of them after that. I'm curious if there was ever a moment you look back on when that all came together for you, that, wow, what an impact my family has had on who you are today.
Well, it's my family, not just my mom and dad, but my younger brother and my nephews and my niece now, and, my cousins and aunts and uncles. And I grew up in a small community here in southern Alberta called Nanton. And, the community, the school, everybody was so supportive. And, it's really easy to overcome obstacles in life and challenges in life when you have the support of so many. So when I've really started to realize how grateful and blessed I am to grow up where I have, and it's not that I, was never grateful. I've always been very grateful and proud of where I grew up and all of that. But I've done a lot of traveling. For example, on Sunday I'm going to China to speak at some schools over there, and when you go to places like China or like Cambodia or Nepal, where people with disabilities are sort of cast aside. They're seen in a negative light as a drain on society, begging for change on the street. In China, when you're having, they have the one child law. You wanted to have a healthy baby, and you didn't want to have a child with a disability because that wasn't going to be a productive member of the society. So much like you working, at a home for at-risk children, you grew up in, some pretty tough situations. Going out and seeing some of the conditions that other people with disabilities are raised in, or maybe not even raised in, but just sort of cast aside in. Very grateful, and we all need perspective. I guess in doing what I do, I provide perspective to other people that see me doing a marathon or see me just out with a smile on my face. And there's people that provide perspective to me. We all do get a little guilty of not fully appreciating what we have in our lives. So much like you said, you maybe take for granted the fact that you can run. There's times where I'm guilty of taking for granted, where I grew up and the luxuries I had, growing up in North America or in Canada with, the systems that are in place to help out with people with disabilities. And I think that's why it's important to really get out there and see the world and open your eyes to everything, to gain perspective and gain knowledge. It's so important.
Yeah, I was struck by, again, I watched several of your videos since I had this brief encounter with you at the Marine Corps Marathon. And, something you said just told me a lot about you, what clearly an empathetic person you are. And I guess it comes, you've just explained it from just this perspective you have. But you said that, and I'm paraphrasing this, but you said you just have great respect for people who have had their limbs and then lost them because
Correct.
You had a hard time just grasping how hard that would be for somebody to overcome that. And you being born without your limbs, that's a piece of that journey you didn't have to face. I'm curious if you would talk about that for a little bit. I was floored by that.
Yeah, I guess, another question I get a lot from kids is, what does it feel like to not have any arms and legs? And I'll ask them, what does it feel like to have arms and legs? And I say, well, it feels pretty normal. And it's really the same thing for me, having what I was born with. I mean, what I do have for arms are about, to where your elbow would be on both sides. And I have nothing on the left side for leg, and on the right side I have a partially developed leg and foot that maybe goes down to about where your knee would be. And that's what I was born with, and that's what I figured out how to get through life with. You have fingers and toes and knees and elbows, and when you're a baby, you learn how to grasp things with your hands, and you learn how to crawl, you learn how to walk, you learn how to run, and it just all happened naturally. You don't think about how you learn to do things. You just did it. And that was the same thing for me. So I have no frame of reference to be able to look back and say, oh, you know what? I remember when life was a hell of a lot easier when I had my limbs. And yeah, there are days when I think, you know what, if I had arms and legs, life would be easier. I'd be able to reach things that I can't reach at my height. I'd be able to do this and do this, but I don't truly know that. I have nothing to compare it to. So somebody who can look back at the days, times when they had limbs or a limb or whatever it may be, there's that whole emotional and psychological stuff to overcome. And we all have emotional and psychological stuff that we need to overcome. You know, that 6 inches of space between the ears is the strongest muscle we have in our body. And it can also be the biggest obstacle we have in our lives. We have the ability and the power to convince ourselves that we are capable of absolutely anything. And then we can also convince ourselves that we're absolutely worthless. And, you know, if we left this earth, nobody would care. And so that's the big thing there. The no arms, no legs. That's honestly secondary. It's that, again, that 6 inches between the space, between the ears. That is so critical and crucial.
Yeah, I'm curious. You said something in the beginning of our conversation here. You said you have bad days just like everybody else, but your bad days really have nothing to do with not having arms or legs. I'm curious, when Chris Cook's having a bad day, what's Chris struggling with?
Well, if I'm having a bad day, 99 times out of 100, I'm getting in my own way. And, you're just, maybe it's relationship stuff. Maybe it's family stuff. Maybe you're just in a funk and you're questioning what you're doing, or if you're on the right path or whatever. And then something will happen, I don't know. Somebody will say something or ask a question that might, just be on that day. It's annoying or maybe not what I wanted to hear. And then I make it about the fact that I'm missing arms and legs. And then you do start thinking, if I had arms and legs, life would be easier. And you try to find an excuse, trying to find somewhere to lay blame. So then you say, all right, well, if I had arms and legs, life would be easier and I wouldn't be having this crappy day. When, the fact of the matter is, if I had arms and legs, I'd probably still be having a bad day. If I had a bank account with $10 million in it, I'd probably still be having a bad day. If I had the perfect job, I'd probably still be having a bad day. If, my parents and I, or my girlfriend and I, or whatever, weren't fighting, I might still be having a bad day. And it's just, you try and find an easy thing to blame. When in actuality, you need to really dig deep within yourself and figure out what do I need to change? What do I need to fix? What do I need to alter within my mind to make myself happy right now? Because the frivolous things, the money, the cars, the new phones, whatever, doesn't change anything. And not that arms and legs are a frivolous thing, but
right.
It's one of those things where I can't change that. So why am I even wasting time and energy trying to blame it on that? It's something else. It's in the mind. It's almost always in the mind.
Absolutely. I'm curious, Chris, so I saw you at the Marine Corps Marathon, and so how many marathons have you been a part of?
That's my third full marathon. I've done a couple of halves and 10Ks. And actually, the Marine Corps Marathon was my slowest time, but it was also one of the more challenging ones in that it was very hilly for the first 5 miles. That last 300 yards was a huge challenge, and also the volume of people. There was a lot more people in that, so I would get in behind, some runners that were maybe not going as fast as I would be going on a flatter surface. So I really, had to just kind of stay with the pack and, couldn't gain, make up time. But with that being said, as much as I would love to have a personal best every time I go out, it's just about enjoying it, enjoying the people, having fun. And the course took you around some pretty cool places around DC. And, there's sometimes where I had to slow down a little bit and, take a little extra look at Capitol Hill or what have you. So, it's my third, and I love them. Any runner you talk to, they do a 10K for the first time and they want to do more. They do the first marathon and they want more. It's kind of an addictive thing, and honestly, it's a good excuse to keep myself in shape and be able to travel to some cool places just to go do a marathon.
So you said 5K, and then you get 10K on the mind, and then you get marathon on the mind. Do you have anything longer on your mind now?
I've kind of been looking at ultras. I'm finding that after each race, I'm not quite as stiff and sore and beat up as much as the previous ones. So my hip and my ankle are usually pretty stiff and sore after I do a full marathon, and after DC, it was a little stiff and a little sore, but nothing like I've had in the past. So that's kind of like, all right, well, maybe I do have a little more in the tank, and I could do a 50K or something like that. But like I said, I'm just enjoying it, and I'll probably get to an ultra and maybe go beyond that. I don't know, but I just having fun with it.
Is that the main reason you run? Do you have any hopes? Are you trying or hoping to send a message to other folks like me when I'm standing there and seeing you out there?
No, absolutely. There is that, other aspect of it where I'm in a very advantageous situation, which is maybe funny to have somebody hear me say that, having no arms, no legs is actually an advantageous situation. But, I can do a marathon like this, and I can, piggyback that with an opportunity to raise money or awareness for various charities and causes. So for the Marine Corps Marathon, I was raising money for an organization called the Ability Experience, which helps people with more severe disabilities be able to get involved in marathons such as this one by having somebody push them in a stroller or a wheelchair or whatever to go through the course. I've done other marathons where I raised money for accessible playground in Modesto, California. The marathon I did in Calgary, close to home here, I raised money for a homeless shelter, and I love being able to, I guess, maybe not the best choice of words, but exploit my situation to try and help out others. I've had a lot of people do a lot of amazing, kind, and generous things. So anytime I have an opportunity to sort of pay that forward and keep that cycle of karma moving in a positive direction, I'm gonna take that. Absolutely.
I love your spirit. I love your attitude. It's perfect. My podcast, I started this after I ran my first marathon last November. It's been about a year ago now. And I got done with that marathon, and I just felt like, boy, there's just something bigger than me just running. And so, God had put it on my heart that this running journey really has a strong parallel to life, that all of the sort of things you overcome in a race, like 300 yards of uphill finish line at the Marine Corps Marathon, there are some things in our life that we face that are challenging. And that's why when I saw you, I thought, man, I just would love to have this conversation, have him be a part of this show, because you are living that sort of fight the good fight, finishing that race. And I'm inspired by you. I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You said something, Chris, and I don't know if it was on the Oprah piece or if I read it, but you said that your independence is fueled by accepting yourself.
Yeah. I guess, sort of a quote or a saying that I came up with is, if you worry about how you look, you're cheating yourself out of opportunity. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, I'm different. And the difference is not a bad thing. Call it special, call it unique, call it whatever you want. But I get stares, I get questions. I've had every single possible reaction to my not having arms and legs that you could possibly think of, and it doesn't bother me. I'm confident with who I am. I'm confident with myself. I'm comfortable in the skin that I'm in. I'm proud of who I am, and honestly, if somebody thinks I look weird or odd or strange or whatever, that's their problem, not mine. My job's to go out there to have fun and enjoy life, and I think I'm doing a pretty damn good job of it.
I second that.
What? We all have our moments of insecurity, and there's people who think they look fat or they look weird or whatever, and they're afraid to go out in public for fear of judgment, for fear of being mocked, teased, ridiculed, bullied. And that's one thing. I was never teased. I was never bullied at school, and I'm very, very lucky. You know, there are people in my situation who have been bullied, you know, relentlessly. And I think one of the bigger reasons is I've always been confident with who I am. And so there's, you know, people don't pick up on somebody who is, you know, vulnerable. I've never felt that I've been a vulnerable person. And so in that same respect, you know, in all my travels, and I travel a lot, and a lot of times I travel on my own, I have not had somebody try and mug me or rob me. And, you know, knock on wood, I didn't just jinx it. But, you know, it's all that perception of yourself, and it's all about that confidence. You know, how do you teach that confidence? That's the $1 million question. But I think part of that it was developed in how I was raised. I was just a regular person, and we just had fun and enjoyed life as much as we possibly could, whether it be my family, my friends, my hometown here. That's what it's about. And I try and enjoy life and take it in as much as I possibly can, and you know, just a smile, just truly having fun and truly being happy. And, you know, when you smile at somebody, that is probably the biggest you know, sign you can give somebody to let them know that everything's going great. There's nothing wrong. I guess maybe even deter, you know, potentially bad people that might see an opportunity to take advantage of a vulnerable person. You know, flashing that smile, I think it is a deterrent. Maybe, you know, somebody might think that I'm, you know, thinking some sort of utopian, you know, hippy dippy, you know, nice try. That isn't true, but hey, it's been working for me. So,
well, I will. I will tell you
as much smiles as you want, or whatever.
Well, you and I are talking because of that smile. Like I said, going back to the beginning, when you went by on that skateboard, soon after I picked up on you being limbless, I picked up on this guy is smiling, and it really did. It penetrated me. It just sent something into me that drew me to you. And like I said, we're talking about that right now. So I think that's great advice. I'm curious so you travel all over the place talking, when these companies or these organizations call you to come speak to them, what is this topic they want Chris Koch to come talk about?
Well, I guess the theme or the motto of what I speak about is if I can. So if a guy without arms and legs can snowboard, surf, work on the farm, travel the world, or even just live a happy, independent life, you know, if I could do all those things, you know, anybody's capable of anything. And again, it goes back to that 6 inches of space between the ears. And you know, and I keep my presentation light, fun, and funny. You know, obviously do talk about, there are negative times, and, you know, how do I, you know, take myself out of a negative mind space to a positive one. But it's mostly just about, you know, making the most of life regardless of what your situation is. And as I mentioned before, we all have our story, we all have our situation, we all have our obstacles, we all have our challenges in life. And whatever that challenge, and like, again, mine is very visible, it's the lack of limbs. But, you know, it's whether we decide to make it our excuse or make it be something that we are going to not let get in the way. And we're going to make the most out of life, regardless of whatever that story is. And I mean, you know, would I talk to students at a elementary school, or would I would talk to the, you know, a high school, or a, you know, sports team, or a you know, a corporate conference? You know, it's going to be slightly different. You know, if it's an ag conference, I'm going to talk more about my agriculture background. You know, if it's a high school in Sydney, Australia, I'm probably not going to mention as much about farming, but, you know, try and keep it relevant. And I think most of all, just keeping it fun and light and real. You know, so be vulnerable and be open and be willing to share the not so pleasant parts of life, because, you know, if it's just all roses and smiles and there's never any never any bad days. Well, that's not realistic. That's
Right.
not, that's, we all have bad days. And it's the key question is everybody wants to know how can I get myself out of a bad day and, back on top.
And what do you do? What do you turn to the most often, Chris, when you find yourself in one of those bad days and pull yourself out of it? Because it's clear you don't stay in those spaces long. What's your turn to strength?
Taking inventory and notice of the good things that are going on in life. Because when we are in a funk, chances are we're fretting and sweating and worrying about things that we can't change. So wasting time and energy. So I think about, all right, well, I have an amazing family. I have 2 little nephews and a niece that I absolutely love to death. I grew up in an amazing community. I have some tremendous friends. I get to travel the world, share my story, done some pretty cool stuff, seen some pretty neat places, met some pretty amazing people. When I think about that, it makes the fact that, missing arms and legs absolutely moot, absolutely secondary. And also to just simple things like, getting on my board and going out for a longboard and getting some fresh air, getting the body moving, or, when I'm getting ready for marathons or just, keeping myself in shape, I'll often go up and down stairs. Stairs is just a great core workout for me. And so when you're out for a jog in your instance, or I'm up for a board, or I'm doing stairs, you're processing things in your head and in your mind, with the oxygen flowing, and it's in a more positive space rather than, sitting on the couch, feeling sorry for yourself, throwing a pity party. You're working through whatever is on your mind in a much more healthy, positive space when the body is moving and you're getting that fresh air. And I think that is so important, because it's really easy to just dig yourself in a deeper hole and sink into deeper depression or deeper funk just by sitting around on the couch or laying in bed or whatever, feeling sorry for yourself. And yeah, it just goes from bad to worse. So it's, forcing yourself to get out and about, and then also too, I try and wear that smile as much as I possibly can. Usually it's pretty easy to wear that smile. There's some days where you have to try a little harder, but that smile gets smiled back in return, and I feed off the energy and the positivity of other people, and that also helps me too. That's a long answer, but yeah, that's.
No, but it boils down to, I love your just looking for the positive and smiling. I think that 6 inches you talk about, that 6 inches, some days we can make the world far more complicated than it really is. And
Absolutely.
Some days it sounds oversimple to say, look on the bright side or just smile, but it's amazing how those things can work. And like I said, your smile that day had a huge impact on me, and in turn, here we sit and talk today. So I really appreciate your time, Chris. I want to ask one last thing. I'm sitting here wondering, because you are so accomplished. You've done so many things with your travels, with your marathons. If I had to ask you, what's Chris Cook's greatest accomplishment, what would that be, my friend?
Geez, that's a tough question. I mean, there's been a lot of great accomplishments that other people would see as huge as well, and that other people wouldn't really think that I would consider that an accomplishment. But I think just being able to have taken my situation and having the fortune and the opportunity to be able to just go out and have fun and enjoy life, and in turn impact other people and encourage them to do the same. I think that is an incredible thing that I have in my life, and I don't necessarily see it as an obligation. I have no arms, no legs, therefore I have to go out and really prove people. It's just one of those things where I like doing that stuff anyways. And a side benefit is I get to, have an impact on people. So that probably, it's pretty vague, but I would say that's kind of my biggest accomplishment. And then, honestly, the happiest day of my life is, when my first nephew was born, and then my second niece and nephew, twins, when they were born. That's another thing too. If I'm having a bad day, I go hang out with those three. They're 4 and 3 years old, and their love is unconditional, and it honestly lights me up to no end when I get to spend time with them. So that's maybe not an accomplishment, but it's definitely one of the happiest parts of my life.
Well, I'm going to thank you for that answer. I've got 8 and 10-year-old boys, and I can't wait to, may not be tonight, and it may not even be next week, but the day is coming when I'm going to play this for them. That answer that you just gave is the perfect answer. When a man's greatest accomplishment, when a man who has no arms and no legs is telling me his greatest accomplishment is just rooted in being fortunate enough to do the things that you're doing, I think you're looking at life the right way, my friend. And I appreciate this time with you. It's been really moving for me, really motivating, and there's a lot more things I know I can do after talking to you, so I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the show and taking the time, and thanks again. And maybe next time I'm in DC, we'll get a chance to sit down face to face and have a visit.
Please do. Please reach out. I would love to do that. And we've got a big group that comes down here in Richmond every year to run the Richmond Marathon. So maybe I can talk you into come doing the Richmond Marathon. Put that on your schedule one of these years.
Well, I don't think it'll take a whole lot of convincing. I'm pretty much game for anything, so we can definitely talk more about that for sure.
I'm going to be bugging you on that one then. You just opened the door, my friend, and so since you've taught me, if you can, I can, I'm going to be bugging you. So, Chris, thank you very much for being on the show. Thank you. You have a great night, buddy.
Yeah, again, my pleasure. Thank you. You too.
All right, see ya.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation and were moved by that conversation with Chris Koch as much as I was when we talked, and certainly when I stood there at mile 18 of the Marine Corps Marathon and saw Chris for the first time. It was an image that I will never, ever forget, and this conversation he and I had is one I certainly will never forget either. One of the things that Chris said in our conversation that really just sticks with me, and it drives home this metaphor for running has to life. He talked about our minds and the 6 inches between the ear. He talked about that an awful lot. But, one of the things he said, we have this ability and this power to convince ourselves we are capable of absolutely anything. And then we can also convince ourselves that we're absolutely worthless. And I think about that in a running journey. I think that's one of those parallels. We get out there running, and so many of the folks that I've talked to on this podcast talk about running as a mental game. And, when you're not in it and you're just out there and you see people running, you only think of really the physical aspect of that. How could anybody just be out there physically? How are they physically capable of continuing to run and run and run? But the more we get into this thing as runners, I think we realize that, boy, the mental side of this thing is undervalued from the outside looking in. And it really does come down to that. In that act of running, throughout the entire run, we have this ability, we have this mind that's capable of convincing ourselves we can take that next step. We can meet that finish line. But that same mind is equally capable, and I would argue when we're out there running, sometimes that bad boy is far more capable of telling us we don't have another step in us, and to give up. You'll never have enough steps to make that finish line. And just the way that Chris uses that power, that mind of his, day in and day out to address his limitations, which are significant without arms and legs, the ability he's over the years to develop a mind that has absolutely convinced himself and everybody around him that there's just little he can't do. And I'm here to tell you, I saw him go wheeling by there at the Marine Corps Marathon at mile 18. There is nothing this guy can't do. So I hope that message resonated with you loud and clear, whether it's in running or whether it's in life. Keep in mind, you have this mind that you can shape that thing. You can renew it each day and develop a mind that says, I absolutely have the power to do anything that I want to. And maybe you can't, but I know this. We're never going to be able to dream, imagine the things we can do if we don't have our mind pointed in a direction that absolutely believes we can do it. And then if you go to tackle something like that, whether it's running or life, with that attitude and discover along the way that maybe there are some limitations, I think you come out of that experience with a whole different attitude than you would have if you never tried it and went into it believing I am a failure. I just can't do it. So he has me thinking a lot about this mind of mine and being purposeful with it and just the power of this thing I have 6 inches between my ears, as he said. And so I'm grateful. Thank you, Chris Koch, for being on this show and offering us that message. And so thanks. If you want to hear more of these messages that I have been offering, like my conversation with Chris Koch, I encourage you to go to 2tim47.com, TWOTIM 47.com. You'll see some of the blog posts that I've written, you'll have access to all of the podcasts that I've shared. I was moved this weekend at the Richmond Marathon. Several folks said that they have listened to these messages while they're out there running their marathon, which is absolutely uplifting. And I'm just grateful that these messages are proving helpful. But when I talk with guys like Chris Koch, they have that same sort of impact on me that sharing them has on other people. So I appreciate folks who support this mission, both through Patreon. Again, you can learn more about financially backing this mission through Patreon on my website, but also folks who listen, who share, who comment, who just engage on social media and conversations about these episodes. All of that is really powerful to this message. So thank you very much for being a part of it. Finally, if you're getting out there running this week, I wish you good luck. Have great runs. If you're not going to run, get out there and cheer somebody on. I spent this past Saturday many, many hours out cheering folks on. And I don't know, some days I think that feels every bit as rewarding as crossing a finish line myself. So get out there and cheer somebody on. And then if running is not your gig, either way, just thank you for being here, listening in, and I encourage you to come back. Until next time, then, y'all have a great week.